Morning, Bivitri. Thank you so much for
Morning.
joining us this morning. So the House of Representatives, or DPR, on Tuesday officially passed the Criminal Code bill into law in the 11th plenary today, which was led by Deputy Speaker Sufmi Dasko Ahmad. So what's your take on this, Mbak?
Yeah, well, this is probably I have to start from the fact that Indonesia is currently still applying the old criminal code from the Dutch colonial period, from the 1900s. So it's really obsolete. But so the argument, of course, then to replace it with a new, more national-driven kind of criminal code. But then, so it was drafted since long time ago, since I think 40 years ago of some sort. And then, but it was only tabled since 2015, and then it was stopped in 2019, also because of the big demonstration. We all know it as Reformasi di Korupsi at that time, Reformasi di Korupsi movement. So the government and the House of Representatives stopped the discussion, but then they start again. Now, the content of the law is still problematic, in my view, because the government always argues that this is a departure from colonization because this is a new one, the karya anak bangsa. So, but the content, I would say, still has some articles that are actually will prevent, freedom of expression, and then.
What are these articles that are problematic to you?
Well, I'm with the National Alliance for this penal code reform. So we still see 18 articles at least that are still problematic. One of them, for example, is the living law article. We call it living law article because it says that this penal code recognizes local laws that are considered still living. That's why I call it living law article, to be part of the penal code. So that actually is problematic because then we can have, if you go to West Sumatra, for example,
when you say local, you mean regional?
Oh, I see. Local and regional laws, okay. They are considered as part of the penal code. And then there's also, it was mentioned before, the insult to the president article on the insult to the president, for example, which of course is not good for our democracy, because then we will be afraid to convey our message, to criticize the president and vice president. And then we also have, this is what's also very interesting, we also have an article saying that saying about dissemination of ideologies other than Pancasila, the guiding principles. This is so widely open for interpretation, right? So it can be then used for, I don't know, probably, is capitalism included, for example? Right. Is it against the Pancasila? So it's a question mark. It also says, of course, Marxism and Leninism, which in the modern time also should be questioned why it's there. And then it has what's, I think, been the focus by especially foreign media is the cohabitation provision. It says that, one cannot have sexual relationship before marriage. Although then it says that the ones who can report the occasion is only the family members of the person. Right. But still, it creates the image of Indonesia being, being too conservative in this kind of issue.
Yeah. If the purpose is to modernize our society, it seems to be some of it seems to be counterproductive in that sense. Now, a lot of these issues that you mentioned, there's a certain vagueness towards that. It's like a gray area. There's no real black and white. So then who decides? Like, I mean, if something is reported to authorities, how is the decision going to be decided? For example, what isn't considered an insult and what isn't? Isn't that a matter of opinion? And when it comes to something like, a lot of these other laws have to do with somebody having to decide whether or not this is actually legal or not, in which case, if there's no precedent for this yet, then who makes these decisions and how are these decisions based on?
Yeah, well, this is a penal code, so all reports will be processed firstly by the police.
Okay.
And then afterwards going towards the prosecutor and then going to the court. But that's exactly the problem because we still see, you know, some challenges, institutional challenges in the police, and we are afraid. I mean, even before this new penal code, we already have problems with the ITE law, the transaction and information and transaction law. Where we cannot freely criticize the government. So we are afraid that it will even be harsher for many activists. Then again, there are some technicalities. It further says that only the president and the vice president themselves who can report that. So it's an Indonesian legal term, it's called delik aduan. But in our opinion, the article should not be there, you know, in the first place, because then we really depend on who is the president.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, this is a penal code, right? So it's we have to really rely on the system, not the person.
Yes.
So I don't know who will be Indonesian president after 2024.
Good point, because somebody who may be not doing using that law to their advantage now, that may not be the case like years from now when somebody else is in charge.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they always say that, well, this is, you know, this Indonesian culture, so we cannot insult anyone. Yes, absolutely, I understand that. But there is already another article saying that anyone, three of us, for example, if we feel insulted, then we can report to the police anyway. So why not the president just use that?
Yeah.
So
instead of making a new law by itself, you mean?
Yeah. So this is what I mean, I can say that this is what we can see as the failure to departure from the colonization, because in the old days, this kind of article is to protect the Dutch queen at that time. And at that time also, with the Dutch parliamentary system, then there's the queen and then there's the prime minister, right? So the head of the government is the prime minister. But now, the head of the state and the head of the government all on the president. And of course, the head of the government is the object of criticism.
Yeah.
So that's why in many democratic countries, this article doesn't exist anymore. This is the leste majeste, they call it.
Yeah, like in Thailand.
Like in Thailand, exactly. But we don't have a king here or queen, so.
Yeah. So there has been a lot of reaction from the public, probably uproar as well from the public around this code. And the government has also invited the public, for those who mind, to, okay, why don't we just examine it, and why don't you just, you know, like take it to the Constitutional Court if you do mind some of these articles. Well, what do you think of this? Will it actually work?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, because I would say this narrative is this narrative actually shows how arrogant the House of Representative members and the government are, because they always challenge those who oppose a law. So not only the penal code. Previously, they also said that on the case of the job creation law and, you know, the new capital law, whatever laws that are controversial, at the end they always say, just bring it to the court.
Yeah.
So, you know, as if the court is the next step in the legislative process, which is wrong. And at this point, actually, we have quite low confidence on the Constitutional Court. because of the big, first of all, because of the big conflict of interest, because now the head of the Constitutional Court is actually the brother-in-law of the president. That's one thing. But even worse than that, just a couple of weeks ago, there was one justice who was sacked, and the House of Representatives actually announced that it was because of their decisions. They too often nullified the laws made by the House of Representatives. So they are not happy about that.
Wow.
You know, it's in the country based on rule of law, that's a big no-no, right? I mean,
it's almost authoritarian.
Yeah. So we are afraid that the Constitutional Court is not that objective anymore. Also because the House of Representatives will very soon discuss a law saying that any of the 9 justices can be evaluated and then taken out from the court, just like what they did with this Pak Aswanto, the Justice Aswanto.
Right.
So it's really systematic.
Yeah.
So basically, I would say it will be challenging. Of course, constitutionally, the forum is there.
Yeah.
The next step we can do formally is to go to the Constitutional Court. But now it's we have big question mark on their whether they can be objective or not.
Possible but unlikely, basically, situation. So let's look at the next 3 years. This is implementation period.
Yeah.
What is this implementation period, and what is it supposed to accomplish, and what can happen within these 3 years if, let's say, one of these laws people really are not in agreement with, and the government decides can they make a change within these 3 years? What's happening here in this 3-year period?
Well, can they make changes? Yes, they can. Whenever they feel like to.
They can do that anytime,
they can
right?
do
so
that
what's
anytime.
this? Why this window?
So this window is actually for the government to prepare the necessary steps to implement that fully.
I see.
Because to be fair, I also have to mention that there are some new rule of the game in Indonesia's legal system.
And that are good?
Quite good, because now for the first time we have the how do you call it, social work as the type of punishment.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, which of course then needs database and then connection between the
where they'll be working
the ministries and all that, which we don't have in place at this point, frankly. And then they also need the time to make sure that the police who will implement this penal code understand.
True.
And this is really very challenging given the vast, how big Indonesia is, how many police officers that they have to educate.
And they have to uphold these laws consistently across everywhere you go, so everyone has to be on the same page. That's true.
And then, of course, there will be government regulations to implement the law. Like the living law, for example. This is something that we are really concerned about. Right. What if, in one province it's too conservative and, we cannot do anything there. Probably we have to wear headscarf and all that. So there should be guidelines from the central government on this.
Wait, so what takes precedent? Like what is the priority when it comes to a regional law conflicting with a federal law or a national law?
Well, national law.
Okay.
Yeah, but then there's this political issues. Like, I mean, frankly speaking, if I see Aceh, I disagree with the fact that they have this specific Islamic law only in Aceh. But there's some political issues that make the government, let that applicable in Aceh.
Okay. So what happens if one of these laws, is this going to be implemented right away? For example, if somebody breaks this law right now within this 3-year period, is this what they're going to start doing now in the next 3 years, start to uphold the law, or are they just basically, is this more of a what do you call it, a buffer for us to get used to it before anything is actually done?
Yeah, so they cannot implement it within these 3 years.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense then.
So we also see this as a window of opportunity to negotiate. They can probably they will be willing to change it.
Good point.
Right.
It's just the first draft that we're seeing, hopefully.
It is. Hopefully. And when this law was passed, of course, many foreign media highlight this issue. So what is the impact on, what is the impact on how foreign countries see Indonesia? And in terms of many, because yesterday Russia also mentioned about the economic impact on it, whether,
tourism could be affected.
Tourism, investment, foreign investment coming in, they might sort of ask questions whether it's feasible to invest in Indonesia. What's the impact, do you think?
Yeah, well, this law, I think, creates this bad image on Indonesia, especially after the G20 success and all that. So, as I said before, there are some technicalities. So, one simple question would be, what if, foreigners come to Indonesia and they check in together?
Yeah, I mean, it's like...
Does the law apply for them too? That's what
because
the answer
it is, right?
Actually not.
Okay. It's
Really?
Yeah.
Because I thought in one of the articles it says that, this is applicable not only for Indonesians but also for foreigners coming to Indonesia.
Yeah, that's actually inaccurate because it's applicable for Indonesians, and then the ones who can report the action are only family members of the person.
All right.
So delik aduan. But then the worries is, there is still some worries because then at least there is this perception that this is actually unlawful act. So one can take law into their own hands, persecution. So that can happen because I should say that even before this law again, there were cases, right, when people, some young people probably in the dorms, they just get together, and then the people just take law into their hands. They take usually of course the women, and then so this is something that could happen because
they think the law's on my side. So right,
exactly.
Right.
The perception, this is unlawful, so we can do that, although they cannot.
Right, and there's some misconceptions about the details of this law. And like you said, it does make great clickbait for foreign media outlets. So what I've seen is like, the most that I've seen is the cohabitation one, of course. That's the one that gets the most clickbait.
Because it's just different lifestyle, isn't it?
Right, and my friends have asked me about it, my family from overseas, and I've had to explain, well, this is going to be a complaint law. This is going to be something that authorities will only look at if there's going to be somebody who is allowed to complain to make the complaint. It's not just randomly police are ransacking people's homes to see what activities are going on, right? But again, perception is everything sometimes.
Yeah. But there is living law though, the living law article. So it could happen that in some provinces, if the living law actually put that as unlawful actions, then it could also happen.
Even for foreigners, you mean? No.
Well, on paper, not for foreigners, but then again, in Jakarta or probably in Bali, we can think that they are safe places, but I don't know if we go to part of West Sumatra or more conservative areas.
Cultures
probably they will have something like that.
Bivitri, so much to cover here, but thank you so much for at least giving us a deeper look into this. We still have a lot to uncover, and hopefully we get to do so, and hopefully we get to catch up with you again soon.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take another break here on the program. It's 10 to 8 now. We've got some recaps for you when we return here on the C Morning Show. We'll be right back.